Started. It's supposed to start at 12, and it's not.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here with us.
Hello.
So, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Kara Dorjai, and I'm excited to welcome you to our BPNN policy call today. We know right now with COVID, there is a lot going on, and we are all trying to kind of manage as we go through trying to raise our families and navigate just the needs that are popping up in the community. So we encourage you to get ready to participate in today's webinar. This is our first time using Zoom for the BPNN, so I encourage you to check out the chat box. We're going to have some conversations going on there to get to know all of you a little bit more. And we have a great, wonderful presentation coming up today with our Casey Family Programs team and our Children's Trust Fund Alliance team, and we're really super excited to be with you all today.
Huh? Oh,
and so,
thank you.
Side of me, Kara Georgi, as part of the Parent Partnership Associate with the program pulled together in terms of what can we do as parents, but most importantly, how can we be informed about policy and things like that. And both of them have some great information to share. So our agenda today is we're going to have Tecoria kick us off and kind of set the stage. Then we'll go into some current policy discussions and developments affecting children and families, and that'll be with Christine and Lauren. I'm going to let you know ahead of time, this is going to be a very engaging portion of our webinar today, because we will be kind of taking down the PowerPoint and getting to interact with each of you. We will take a break in between the federal update and the general state updates for questions and answers. So I encourage you to be thinking of those. We did receive some in advance and submitted them to the team. Then we'll hear from Sharonda talking about the Alliance Resiliency Project, and then we'll wrap up with any last questions and answers and talk about other opportunities that you might be able to be involved with. So we look forward to being able to interact with all of you today. It's our first time using Zoom. You will see some handouts that will pop up in the chat. Those are going to include our BPNN registration flyer, our flyer for our next BPNN webinar, which is coming up at the end of July on the 30th about our PACs. That's part 2. I encourage you to check that out. Also, we'll have information about our Alliance Resiliency Project, and you'll hear a little bit about that from Sharonda. So I encourage you, sit back, relax, get ready to have some great fun with our wonderful network that we're excited to be with today. And now I'll turn it over to Tecoria.
Good day, everyone. What you've experienced in your life acts like a lens. So if you wear prescription glasses or sunglasses, you kind of know what I mean. When you look into the world, your experience can bring things into focus, and sometimes it puts a little tint on it, depending on the mood. Your perspective is so valuable because it is unique to you. We are all unique individuals, that's no big secret, but like most of us members of the BPNN, we share some common denominators. Birth, resource, kinship, friends as family, whatever our tag is, we are a people with a powerful lens. And in these current times, we are seeing so much. Our lived experiences intertwine, intersect, and highlight everything going on in the world right now. Racial injustice, health disparities, And neighbors in inequity, the education and justice systems, and I am certain we could all tell very recent and personal narratives from our stories about how these societal realms affect us. At the very center of these stories, for all of us, is our children's health, our children's education, our children's future. We all share our children's future because children are the future. Today, we are joined by our friends and neighbors in advocacy. We will hear from Jim McKay of West Virginia. He's with us from the Alliance. Christine Calpin from Casey Family Programs Public Policy Office is joining us from her post in Washington, D.C., along with Lauren Basutti, to let us know about policy happening at the federal and state levels. We'll also hear from one of our own as she shares the parent perspective on current work the Alliance is doing. And she is a supermom, Sharonda Sullivanov, a BPNN member from Washington State. With our allies, we will get a pulse on right now policy and how it is moving through the Capitol. There will be time for questions. You are strongly encouraged to put your perspective in that chat box. As BPNN members, we have a privileged opportunity to speak directly with people who then take our perspective and represent it authentically to policymakers. You have the power to make changes. We made them in our lives and in the lives of others. We can make changes in policy. It is our right as constituents and as citizens. Our voices are needed not only to shape policy to be worthy of practice, but to make it worthy of serving families like ours. Let's listen carefully and reflect thoroughly in the chat. And here are a few sharing points to think about just to get you started. For example, if that's policy, then why does X happen or why does X not happen? In my experience, when X happens, Y happens. In my community, I see needs being met by, and another starter for you is, these are the needs not being met in my community. So those aren't the only ones you can choose from, just a few to kind of get those juices flowing. We don't check for spelling or grammar, just use your words. We would appreciate you sharing your home state as well when you put your comments in the chat box. You will have plenty of question and answer opportunities, so be ready to unmute yourself and share your perspective. In this time of so many unknowns, we as parents and caregivers of children do know that we have an important responsibility. Our children deserve the best we can offer them. Be confident that we know what we need. So this is an opportune time to celebrate your community. It's also an opportune time to raise concerns. Some states don't get it, and that's okay too. We have friends and neighbors who are here to uplift our BPNN voice. Jim McKay is going to share with us how the Alliance is doing just that. He is one of the BPNN's trusted friends in this work. Thanks for being with us today, Jim.
Thanks to Coria. That was so great to have your leadership and pulling us all together. If we could advance the slide to the next slide, Kara. So just real quickly, Coria laid it out. What we're talking about today for advocacy, for policy is how do we collectively, as communities, as people, help meet each other's needs and the needs of families. And for the Alliance, we really take our cues from the leadership of our parent partners. And so just here on the slide, you can see we've got kind of three levels of activity. First and foremost, it's about listening. It's about hearing what's really happening in families, in communities, and as all of us are caring for our kids and helping move our their futures forward. So we're convening these caring conversations each week. We're having conversations for a better normal, trying to communicate with our membership of our children's trust funds and listen as they are responding to family and community needs. Then from that, we are mobilizing. We're not advocating on behalf of, but we are mobilizing the voices of lived experience, mobilizing to help each other out through meeting family needs, promoting resilience. We're so excited about the Alliance Resiliency Project that Sharonda is going to share a little bit later, helping meet the needs of families during the pandemic and beyond. And then from that, we're lifting up those needs and experiences to lawmakers, to the media, doing state level advocacy, and really just trying to advocate for systems change, for transforming our community so that every family and child can thrive in our nation. And that includes, you know, a renewed commitment to racial justice and equity. And we're taking our cues from the lived experience of our members of the BPNN and elsewhere to really advance this change. And we just really appreciate your time and being part of this work, helping us advocate for systems change and partnering with so many great partners, including Casey Family Programs, to help just understand better the experiences of families, and then to provide information that we're going to hear later from what's happening in DC right now as lawmakers are responding to those needs, and how can we express our experiences to them so that all of us have a better outcome. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our other, back to Corey, I believe, and we'll continue to move forward. But again, we just really appreciate everyone being part of this work. If you go to our website, you can sign up for additional information, and we just appreciate the partnership we have with each one of you. Thanks.
And thank you, Jim.
And to Coria, I was wondering, what do you think about if we do a quick poll and see who is joining us today? Want to see what that looks like?
You know, I love a good poll, Kara.
All right, so the poll should be up on your screen. What is your hat that you're wearing today? Are you birth parent, a foster parent, a grandparent, kinship caregiver, a professional, or other? And if you click other, share in the chat box, what hat are you wearing today? I think one of the great things about our network is that we are a combination of parents and professionals coming together. Wonderful, so I'm going to share those results. So it looks like we have about half of the audience is birth parents, 6% is foster parents, we have 31% of professionals, and we have some other people that make up about 13%, and I'd love to hear your roles in the chat. And from now, I will turn it back to Coria to pass it off to our great next presenters. Coria?
Absolutely. So next we're going to hear from Christine Calpin. She is with Casey Family Programs Public Policy Office. Joining her is the Public Policy Advisor, Lauren Basutti. I've had the opportunity to work with both of these ladies closely, and I trust them 100%. They, again, are authentic allies in this work. So please pay attention. There's going to be some good stuff here. Get that chat, get your chat questions in there, or think of what you want to ask when the question and answer time comes up. So ladies, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much to Coria, and it's such a pleasure to be with you all today. And Lauren and I are thrilled to have a chance to sort of walk through some of what we're seeing around policy and discussions at the federal and state level, and really look forward to having a discussion and dialogue. What we thought for our time would be most helpful would be to start with some of the updates on the federal level. And I do want to thank all of you for sort of in advance sharing some of the issues most important to you, and we will share what we know about them. But as Coria and others have outlined, please also do post in the chat, and we'll do our best to really respond and share what information we have. You know, July is always an interesting time in Washington, D.C. and federal policy work, because I've had the privilege of working in policy and doing this type of engagement for over 20 years. And July has always been sort of a sprint to August, because it always seems to represent sort of a chance to sort of think about what's on the radar and what's coming. Obviously, this year looks different, not in the sense of we still are expecting that Congress is intending to be sort of more focused on district activities than perhaps traveling back to DC and doing votes during the month of July. But what we're really trying to see and work on right now is, as Jim really highlighted at the beginning, so much attention and focus around the next fiscal relief package, and in particular as states continue to struggle and sort of think about responses from the pandemic, and we continue to look at and learn more about the needs of families and children during this time, really making sure these fiscal relief packages reflect those needs and those issues. So first and foremost, to date, since the COVID pandemic has started, Congress has passed 4 different relief packages, including a host of topics and areas, everything from loans for businesses, tax relief. We saw the individual stimulus payment checks as immediate fiscal relief. We saw a host of funds appropriated in various programs for housing, for the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, additional resources for childcare, a range of areas that really were targeted and intended to prop up a family support system. So that was very positive. I think where we are right now, though, is our recognition that Congress, across the aisles, and both the House, Senate, as well as the administration, all seem to be in agreement that there will be a 5th relief package passed before they sort of move from votes to their August work period. But what exactly will be in that package is still to be determined. The House passed their version about a month ago. It had over $3 trillion in priorities and programs. And largely what that means is that now that the House has passed a version, we will wait and see what the Senate is going to move forward. We're still in sort of a wait and see period as to what the Senate is going to prioritize. As for the administration, publicly what they're saying is they want a federal relief package that costs no more than $1 trillion. So the takeaway is, yes, everyone agrees there should be a 5th relief package. However, there still lacks agreement on what exactly should be in there. There were in June a lot of conversations about, is it about more fiscal relief and more federal dollars flowing to states and jurisdictions? Or is this going to need to be about states reopening and the reopening of states triggering the economy and jobs to come back that many felt COVID sort of took away? Some of us would say that as we've seen states reopen, and in many instances less successfully than I think many had hoped, particularly with the surges, with a lot of cost, with a lot of questions around mask mandates and how to do this safely, that we're seeing more agreement that there needs to be more fiscal relief to sort of keep states and families in and to protect them during this time. The challenge, though, is there's still a lot of areas where there's probably more questions than answers. But we are going to share what we know. I think a lot of this speaks to what Decoria and Sharonda and others will really lift up, which is the absolute necessity for your voice and identification of those critical must-do items and issues that absolutely need to be a part of conversations at the federal level. So in terms of this fiscal relief and a number of the issues that you all have identified as important to families, obviously first and foremost, not foremost, but at least first on my list here as a mom as well, is the schools reopening in the fall. And there's a real both political as well as policy conversation going on. And you all are seeing the political in terms of the administration, Secretary DeVos making very strong statements, giving an indication of pressuring and urging states to reopen. I think the two pieces of this for you to take away is states are largely responsible for their education systems. They oversee the vast majority of the funding, and education has been much more of a state issue. Yes, there are federal dollars that flow into states for education, but the extent to which some of what the secretary is saying in terms of defunding education and some of what they're discussing or what you're seeing in the press related to education, it's unclear whether she has the authority to do this or whether it would take congressional action to actually change the dollars the way she's talking about. More importantly, groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics and others have been trying to bring their voice and education forward in trying to provide guidance on how to safely reopen schools and how to support families and schools in doing that. I think trying to be a partner and sort of trying to really think through what the resource needs will be to sort of support education in a safe manner for our children and how that aligns with what's happening is where the conversation needs to go. Unfortunately, that's not where the conversation is right now in DC. There are committee hearings looking at this issue. So again, it's something to keep watching, but it will largely, we expect, they will continue to be state and local decisions about when and how the schools will reopen. Childcare obviously is a huge area in terms of needs. As I've expressed, CARES has the CARES, and by CARES I mean one of the fiscal relief packages that Congress passed. There was more money put out for childcare. Again, I think there's a recognition that you can't reopen the economy. You can't think about individuals going back to work, re-engaging in what was happening without safely providing and thinking about childcare. So we hear that conversation in terms of dollar figures and what that means. I think a lot of that is still being figured out. Again, there's a number of other areas you've asked about. Unemployment benefits. There is interest, and the bill that the House passed, which was largely done by Democratic leadership and the Democratic votes, did extend the emergency unemployment insurance benefits and the increase of $600 per week for several months. It's unclear if the Senate will agree on that proposal. So whether that will be extended, we're not sure, but it would need to happen by July 31st. Similarly, there's a lot of conversations about how or whether to extend the eviction moratorium. It continues to be a discussion point, so it is something folks are talking about. We're asking, and it's frustrating, but for a lot of these topics, all we continue to hear is we're talking about it, we're thinking about it. Hopefully within the next week or so, as we see proposals and discussions, we'll get more clarity on a number of these issues. But I do think it's just critical that if these are priorities of yours, that you continue to educate folks on what they mean and why they continue to be important. Same goes for extending enhanced SNAP benefits. All of these are, and it's important, I always say, make sure that you're as comprehensive in your list of what needs to be extended as possible. You should not make any assumptions that everyone is aware of every program or every item that will be expiring or need to be extended. So anything that's a priority should be lifted up. We have seen the administration through the Children's Bureau release a lot of guidance and direction to jurisdiction leaders about how to use funding they currently have to support technology. The needs in both education as well as a lot of what's happening in family support and the social service programs has moved to virtual, has brought forward a conversation about how federal dollars and what additional federal dollars need to be provided to support this technology. There does seem to continue to be interest in understanding what else is needed. We continue to lift up real concerns around broadband, concerns around access to internet, how to really make sure that there's equity in what's happening here and what that looks like. The courts obviously continue to be a huge piece of this, and particularly in child protection. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've been finding in communicating with policymakers is making sure they understand the urgency and importance that child protection systems continue to engage with families, continue to engage with children. We're having a lot of conversations about some of the federal policies related to timelines and related to concerns around case planning. Most importantly, to make sure that in no way is any decision made on a family or related to their case in the COVID environment that isn't sort of reflective and that can really sort of make sure no family is harmed in any way by what's going on. And we're lifting those conversations up through every avenue we can. We'll continue to elevate that. I know it's something the Alliance continues to do as well. The other few areas on the federal level I wanted to touch base on, the Justice and Policing Act. And so this is the legislative policy that's responding to the murder of George Floyd and is really becoming sort of the space to look at the role of law enforcement in communities, in education, and really trying to sort of elevate the importance of this discussion. The House did pass their version. Again, much like fiscal relief, the House has moved on this. They're waiting to see what the Senate may do. I'm hearing mixed messages as to whether this might be something they can do in 2020 or whether it actually does wait till 2021. I think there's a lot of interest and focus on this as a legislative priority, but it will just depend on time and also depend on how much they hear from constituents and stakeholders about the need to really prioritize this. And these are, these priorities often take drum beats because there's a long list of to-do items, and so making sure what's important to you stays on the to-do list is always most important. We have the couple of weeks in July. I think you'll have opportunities in August when they're in their district sort of work period time, really thinking about how to engage, how to lift up these priorities, how to be a resource to them, how to share what's going on. And I think that's going to continue to be so critical in everything that's been going on. And then the last piece of the federal update I wanted to sort of turn to before we go to questions was, I know a number of you had questions about the executive order that the White House released around child welfare and families. So this was a long time coming. We had heard for years about the interest at the administrative level and really trying to look at child welfare and a number of aspects of supporting families. What this is as an executive order is really a statement of federal priorities and focus. Executive orders have the ability for the president to direct his administrative officers. So in this case, it's the secretaries of HHS on key areas and key priorities that he would like to see the secretary really utilize in support of their goals. It is not federal law. So it is something that really reflects instead what this administration is prioritizing. This executive order really focused on 3 key areas. Those of you who have had an opportunity or have heard Assistant Secretary Lynn Johnson speak of recent know that one of her priorities is around really looking at permanency and elevating urgency for children and families in foster care with a particular lens to a population of children that she's identified who are lingering and waiting for some sort of permanency. So the executive order sort of focused on 3 areas for HHS to just continue to examine. The first being really looking at how they're partnering with state agencies, public, private, as well as faith-based groups in terms of really working on supporting families. The second was a focus on HHS really doing all it can to provide resources to caregivers and those in care, with a focus on kin caregivers, on looking at trauma-informed training, and on really how to enhance the support, for these families in the important work they're doing. And then the last area was related to an issue of federal oversight. And much like in education, in terms of how states administer child welfare programs, if they don't meet federal guidelines, they stand to lose the federal money that they're provided. And so the oversight is a way for administration and for HHS to really be clear on, you should be meeting the spirit of the law. You should really be working in certain ways to promote permanency. And so they'll be looking at what avenues they have in that capacity to oversee programs to really be sure they're utilizing all available means around permanency. So I am going to stop and turn to Lauren to ask her to build on or add comments on anything here. And then we'll also look at the chat here. She also could maybe talk me through what questions we have.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to flag, I put a link to the executive order that Christine was just speaking about, as well as the second link in there is just a brief summary of that for your information. And I think right now, I don't have any sort of extra things to add at this point. I think we should turn it over to questions from you all. And I know Takoria will help facilitate that for us.
Excellent. So definitely, if you have a question, please go right ahead and unmute yourself. Don't need to raise your hand or anything like that. Just jump right in. There was a lot of information, so I hope you have some questions.
So hi, this is Sandra. And so yes, it was a lot of information. And, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about is how do we advocate beyond the pandemic? I understand a lot of information you gave was about that. And the other thing is in regards to the executive order, obviously to me, it does nothing to benefit the precursor to foster care, permanency, and you know, caregivers, in my opinion. So my question would be, outside of the what can we do beyond the pandemic, how can we, those things that you mentioned, the unemployment, extended SNAP, those are some of the things that obviously were needed before, before the pandemic. How can we move on those in an urgent way, right? Because the things that put families at risk still are very much those same things that we are talking about will not be extended, right? So none of those things were covered in the executive order, right? So it still leaves families at risk, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I'm happy to, thank you for the question, Sandra, and it's great to see you. And I know Jim Jim, please jump in as well, because I know you're really active in the space here. So I have 2 thoughts. First, you're absolutely right. I think the best way to continue to be clear on how important these are as part of a family support system is to continue to lift them up to policymakers as key priorities. And I believe your lens of this is not just, the pandemic amplified what we already knew. That's the language we've been trying to sort of lift up, is that what the pandemic did was put a light on how fragile our social support system was and how it really wasn't meeting the needs of families. And so as we try to think about what we want that long-term system to look like, really advocating for these in the short term has to remain a priority. And I think it's critical that you really are clear on what's needed. Because one example of, I always say you've got to really think about what it is you want dollars to be supporting. And I think one of the greatest examples is there have been a lot of groups in the advocacy community who are asking for a considerable amount of resources and a host of current child protection system programs. And it's time to start asking questions about, is the money propping up our current systems what we want, or is the money directed in other ways to really get into the hands of our families and really support their issues where we want to be going? And we're seeing a real interest in what members on both sides see is all of the money they're appropriating is not getting into the hands of families and children. And it's frustrating. And they have been writing letters to governors. And when we get to the state policy piece here, really talking about advocating at the state level to make sure that all of that money that is flowing into your state for cares is getting to the community agencies, is getting to the families, continues to be such an issue. And I think, so Sandra, that would be my answer, is continuing to be really clear, like you've said, of how critical these are as supports for families and what's at risk when they're gone. Because that's a message that has to penetrate and has to really be lifted up by families and by individuals with their policymakers.
And I'm sorry, I have one other question in reference to the justice and policing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this as an opportunity to perhaps move on a commission and or an accountability system for the child welfare system as well, which is over-policed, in my opinion? I mean, children, or, families are over-policed. My apologies.
No, absolutely. And I'll say when we quickly began reaching out to some of our friends on the Hill, and by that I mean staff we work with a lot, and we're trying to make them understand that any changes or any work you do in law enforcement is going to impact child protection. Because we talked about, first and foremost, the excessive authority that law enforcement has, which has led to direct placements and referrals and removal of children into foster care as an issue, particularly in states where law enforcement has sole authority for removals and placements. And we're finding, first and foremost, it's not an issue they are aware of. So the more folks are really recognizing the role law enforcement plays, not just in, I've said to folks, there's nothing more important to any of us than the protection of children. But law enforcement aren't trained, they're not assessed, and they don't walk into a situation with an eye toward really what is in the best interest of a child who might be in a situation around which they're engaging with a family. And that's where trying to think about, as you've said, how law enforcement engages in the community, their authority, and what that has really meant in terms of, as you said, over-policing and over-engagement, and disproportionately impacting Black and Brown families in terms of coming into foster care are key issues we're bringing up. And there's been a lot of interest in looking at how both policies do this, but how the systems are leading to this. Yeah, so we're finding a lot of interest. They would, this is going to take a lot of conversation, and more stakeholders bringing forward. And so we would love to keep talking with those of you interested in lifting it up. But we're finding staff and others who are, and Jim and Lauren, please correct me, but particularly in a policy lens, staff are always looking for their ways for their members to be involved in conversations, right? And so what we'll often hear is someone saying, oh, well, our members been asking, are there issues related to this that we should be talking about? And that's where we're putting this. And we're getting a lot of receptivity. Let me stop. Jim or Lauren, if you've been seeing others, I would welcome your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I would just add that I think information and really lifting up what that looks like in your community, what that, you know, and helping people understand that is so appreciated. People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so in the spirit of just elevating that and making connections, that's one of the things that we've, you know, really found to be effective. If they're interested in this, you know, make sure that they also understand this side of it, which they may just, you know, simply have it just didn't occur to them because of, you know, whatever reason. But I think, you know, lifting up what you're seeing, experiencing, you know, in your community makes absolute sense.
Well, let me say it's been lifted up in New York, but there's been no action. So that's why I mentioned the federal, you know, the movement at the federal level. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, and I'll just add, Sandra, and we can continue this offline, but
Okay.
you know, to the extent that you have examples of how this has been brought forward and how you weren't able to sort of, you weren't either listened to or, to your point, like it wasn't paid attention, helps to show that federal law doesn't go far enough. And so, because often, I mean, if any of you were to spend time reviewing any of CAPTA or 4E, you'll see a lot of language related to collaboration with law enforcement and to partnerships, right? Which makes it look like there's nothing to do here. And we couldn't disagree more. But without the really concrete examples of how this isn't working, we are not getting as far as we'd like. And so to the extent that there are really concrete examples, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
And those concrete examples are our lived experiences. So please continue to build those questions, put them in chat, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask out loud. We are here to share and to learn and to support and to strengthen. So please come on in and ask your questions.
So I have a couple of questions that are actually related. First of all, I want to lay the ground. Foster parents are volunteers. You know, they're not hired, they're not staff. So they often get relegated to the absolute bottom of everything. And there's a huge power differential there. Now, layer on top of that, the crisis of COVID and visitation. And so what we're seeing two things. We're seeing foster parents who are leaving because they can't afford to remain foster parents. They've lost their job, they've used all their PTO, they just can't do it. And then the other thing we're seeing is that power differential is, and it's unfortunate, and I represent foster parents, but I'm sorry to say, some of them have seized the opportunity to say, no, you can't go visit. And if you go visit with your birth parent, you can't come back home because I'm concerned about the family and everybody who lives in the household. And so there's and I don't know that it's deliberate. I think it's more opportunity has shown up, but they've got a little bit of power now. And they're using it to feel safe. And it's disrupting visitation, which has ramifications all the way down the line of reunification. And I'm really concerned about that. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm watching this play out in our state right now in some really sad ways. Probably the most graphic example is a foster parent who said, no, you can't go, you can't visit with birth parent on your birthday, but we'll take you to the safari park with our family. I mean, to me, that is so wrong on so many levels. And they used COVID as their excuse. That's not okay. And I'm not sure how to, I mean, we've done a lot of talking. One-on-ones, group discussions. There's discussion with our agency about at what point do we, and this is how they use the word, force them to comply with the law and the expectations about visitation. So it's a really messy one, I know, but it's what is absolute top of mind here in our state right now. I'm open to any suggestions.
Jessica, that issue that you raised is definitely one that we feel and speak about often in the BPNN. Right now, there aren't many good answers. I would ask that when Sharonda comes on to talk about what we are doing as a network, that we kind of talk about your opportunities to share that perspective and learn what is happening well in other places. And Jim McKay has put into the chat some opportunities for you to reach out to your local House and Senate government representatives. So please do take that and share it, and let them know what your lived experiences are and how that is affecting you and those that you know of and those that you care for. And I think are we about the time now, Kara?
Yeah, let me just make one quick comment if you don't mind.
Absolutely, Christine.
No, yeah, because I think you're absolutely right. And I am going to second what Coria said, which is this is where your lived experience and how the case plan really operationally is working is so critical. I know we have a partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics. They have been also really trying to look at ways to educate and provide their resources to child welfare leaders on how to safely do visitation and to try to really demyth a lot of this. I hope that it'll be easier to go to courts and for us to go to all our partners and say, here's how you do this safely. You no longer have a reason to say, we just can't do it, because if we could get the pediatricians to weigh in with some guidance on this, that should help.
Okay.
And I think also, though, really looking at the policies, because the short answer there, and this is the long term, policy is unfortunately not written from a perspective of the birth parent and your rights. It is written from a perspective of what they think is in the best interest of the child. And it's just never going to work as currently drafted. So what you're talking about is also exactly why in the long term, really revisiting these policies and thinking about what it means to have a visitation every 6 months, but being really clear about that's not what it shouldn't be that, it should be about something else. And that's where we really need all of you to be a partner and really help us think about that, because they're just checking boxes. And we want a different idea and a different way of really supporting all of you, and really first and foremost not even having these kids in child welfare, right? Like I also feel here like I'm talking about how to make their time in child welfare better, when first and foremost I just fundamentally want to believe they should be home with their parents and we should be wrapping supports around them, and that's where all of this should start from. So please know, like, we're with you on that and would love to keep talking about it.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up is with the starting of school and families choosing to keep their kids home, with the comments the secretary is making, and the percentage of children that could experience fatality should it go back to school. And I seeing those numbers, it's mind blowing that someone at the federal level would even say something like that. But then I think of the privilege that she has had and has in her life to be able to make such comments. And then thinking about, well, how does that affect child welfare and parents making decisions for their children? And if the federal government or the secretary in her position is looking at essentially sacrificing those children, right? Then what are we doing in child welfare, right? Why are we talking about neglect and things if we have people at the federal level making sweeping statements about sacrificing children, right? And then I'm thinking also in turn of the surge in child welfare, because we get a lot of our reports from school officials and families, and these families are known in school districts by teachers. We have lots of counselors and teachers within the school system, and parents, when they choose to, we have state laws and around having your kids enrolled in school and attending school. And when parents make their decision to not send their kids to school, that triggering an investigation, and then child welfare agencies coming in and removing children for not going to school, which we see already in the absence of COVID. And now we have, I feel like there's going to be a huge surge, and we're not necessarily prepared. And I'm just wondering what we can do from a policy standpoint or an advocacy standpoint federally to kind of address that with the things we already know before COVID, and then kind of thinking what it would look like going forward. So that's kind of my question.
Thank you for that, Jason.
Yeah. I heard like 6 questions, Jason, so I'm going to try to grab them all. But if I miss one, hopefully Lauren or others. So, because I think I have so many, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the first thing we need to do now is really be looking at state laws around educational neglect. And now is our window to be really clear on how education as a neglect issue is something that it's going to have to look fundamentally different. And you just said something which is very true, which is prior to COVID, parents who didn't send their kids to school were reported for educational neglect. And now you're in an environment of being asked to voluntarily say you won't be sending your kids to school. So I think it's a real opportunity to begin to talk about why is that even in a neglect environment, which would give us a whole window to begin to sort of get into the conversation around family support and other issues and not be talking about this space. From my perspective, I think thinking about how there's a lot of data that shows that teachers are the #1 reporter, and the vast majority of those cases are unsubstantiated, although they're investigated, right? There's an opportunity here now to really think about partnerships and engaging with teachers around how to give them the resources and a place to really call or be an eye to help a parent that's not a surveillance eye. And to really rethink that model of what this should look like. And I feel like that's the conversation we have to have, because we need the community. We need for everyone to play a role in helping to shape what we're doing. But first and foremost, we have to empower our parents. We have to absolutely empower our parents to lead and be a part of those conversations. And this current system doesn't do that. And so long as the teacher reporting is more important than what a parent is saying they need, we have a problem. And so this seems like an opportunity to be really clear on how this should be driven by a parent and what their needs are and how we support them, rather than just looking at what a teacher believes they may be seeing. And I think we have to begin to really talk through some of that. But that's just that's my thoughts.
Great, thank you. I like the state level educational neglect and looking at that as your state advocacy around that. Shonda will have to do some follow-up.
Yeah, and we should share with you, I saw, and I can send it to Teresa and Meryl to send to you all. We do a leader call that we've been doing weekly with child welfare leaders since COVID. And this discussion of the surge and what to be thinking about in terms of education has really been a topic, because I think there are a great number of them who recognize that they're getting so many calls from teachers that they believe should be going elsewhere, and they want to really think about how they take this window to educate. And Kansas, for one, as a state, actually just put a 2-page resource together that they're sharing with teachers to begin looking at this. I think these are the types of resources that having your eyes on and thinking about as well, how to sort of really put resources together through these lenses of, for teachers, how you really could be helping parents and ways to think about that help that isn't just you need to call CPS. That said, the last thing I want to say, and then I promise to Corey, I'm sorry, but the big challenge teachers have, unfortunately, is that there are a lot of state laws that financially and personally will penalize them for failure to report. And I think the mandated reporting laws and some of those laws right there, without clear training on what this looks like, creates the wrong incentives in their minds around what to do. And I just want to put that out there, because I think so much of this is about looking at the mandated reporting and the system we put in place that's sort of pushing these teachers oftentimes to report because they're so worried they're going to get criminally investigated. And that's not a justification. That's just more of an awareness of some of what I think is impacting why these numbers look the way they do. And I think there's a chance to have a conversation about that.
Policy is so intricate, right? And there's so many pieces and parts that have to work together and filter down to our level. But again, it is our lived experience that needs to move that policy in the direction to go to serve our families in the way it needs to serve our families. So please do continue to be part of these discussions. Reach out to your representatives. And now let's hear from Sharonda as she tells us about what's going on at the Alliance.
Thank you so much, Decorah. And in just the interest of time, I'm going to do a very condensed presentation here, but I just wanted to explain a little bit of the Alliance oh my gosh, I'm having a moment. Resiliency Project. Sorry about that. And this project is actually with the Children's Trust Alliance and has been made possible through Casey Family. And the project actually offers a variety of supports and resources for parents from our three groups, which is the BPNN, the BPAC, and the BFPP. And the purpose of the project is really to help parents and members of these three groups navigate the challenges that we're experiencing currently in COVID. The structure of the project is we have a caring conversation. Every Monday we meet, we come together and we spend an hour just talking about whatever subject matter that the leadership team has identified. Those subject matters are usually led by the parents. We take the information that we've gathered from the prior call, and that kind of helps lead us into the subject matter of the next week's call. Some of the variety of subject matters that we have really explored together is really around some vulnerability, asking for help, receiving help, stress, dealing with children, dealing with the uncertainties of COVID, social relationships, taking care of ourselves. And every week as we, gather this information and sit with each other, it's just been really a space for people to just kind of come together and meet up with friends. I have to tell you, as a facilitator, it's just so encouraging to see faces week after week, and the information and the resources that we gather from one another is just truly proven to be quite invaluable. Another part of the structure of the Resiliency Project is touchpoint parents. And those touchpoint parents, currently we have 5. We have we have 3 on the East Coast and 2 on the West Coast. And the touchpoint parent is really designed, it's a peer support. And if a member from the 3 identified groups has some further conversation or added supports that they would like to talk with on a more individual level, we offer these touchpoint parents to support our members. I'm going to turn it back over to Kara.
Thanks so much, Sharonda. And I encourage everyone to check out the information. Our next caring conversation will be Monday, July 20th. So you'll be seeing an invite coming into your email boxes in regards to that. And you will also receive additional information about the touchpoint parents. They are truly here to support you. Keep typing your questions, comments in the chat box, because I assure you we're going to look through those and really think through those. As we all know, there's never enough time to talk about all the great things about policy. Know that you can go to the Alliance's website, right to the homepage, and that's at ctfalliance.org. At the very top, there's a tab called Parent Voice. Click on that and you will find a ton of resources. I encourage you to check those out as well. And also, here's that reminder about our webinar that's coming up the end of this month. It's going to be about the Parent Advisory Councils and Authentic Partnerships. It'll be a great one for us to all hear how we can start doing this authentic partnering. And I want to turn it over now to Teresa Rosell, our Executive Director, to close us out today. Teresa?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Kara. And really a huge thank you to Christine and Lauren for all of your helpful information Kara, to Coria, Sharonda, Jim, all the folks who helped make today possible. Meryl, who was the orchestration behind the scenes. And I just have to acknowledge such a rich hour with so much information that's valuable. But you know, for a decade or more at the Alliance, we've talked about using a public health approach to address hard issues. And I'm so struck, just in the hour content today, so much discussion about policies and the broad social issues at the federal and the state level. And then the discussion about the individual and relationship issues through the Alliance Resiliency Project and all the work that all of you are doing in your own communities. And it gives me great hope that when we take this multi-ecological level approach, we really will get some of the results we're trying to achieve. And so I have to just call that out and thank you all for that. And I really want to thank our partners at Casey too. So much of this work is because of your commitment and your support. And I think many people who weren't on this call will get to listen to it. I hope many of our members will get to listen to it and learn, and that we will continue to have these conversations so that everyone can use their voice. It's great that we have this opportunity through the rest of July, and then the members in Congress will be home. And that's where you can do some of your education and your information sharing that will really help inform their decisions, which affect us all so much. So thank you all. I know we're at time and don't want to hold you late, but really, really appreciate this conversation today. Kara, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Teresa. And so as we close out, I'm going to let you know that there will be an email coming out with some polling information. We want to hear some more information about what you'd all like to come and join us for. And also there'll be a follow-up survey with some of the handouts and information. But as always, use our contact information, reach out if you have questions, are looking for resources, and know that we're here to support you. And we're just so thankful that you're a part of our network. Hope you have a great rest of your day and stay well, everyone.
Take care, all. Good to see your faces today.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Bye. This was good. Loved it.
Thank everyone.
Great
Goodbye.
job. Great job.
Bye-bye, you all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. I miss you all.
Miss you too.